Hey everyone, this is Walt from Mouse Talk, and welcome to our first annual, I'm going to say first annual, just in case we do this again, our first annual Lord of the Rings mega live stream. Thank you to everyone who's going to be coming in hopefully very, very soon. We have some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful YouTube guests with us today. And oh, Steve and DizneyDan are here in the chat. I'm just kidding. Well, I want to welcome in Dan from DizneyDan. Of course, Megan from Mickey's Magic, and the one and only Steve from Stevesworld, as we are going to talk about all things Lord of the Rings for the next 7 hours. No, I'm just kidding. Not that long. But I want to welcome everybody in, and we're just going to go around real fast and talk about the channels. And, of course, if you haven't already subscribed to our channel here, Mouse Talk, we'd appreciate you doing that. Just hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. It really helps out the channels. And we're going to start with ladies first. Meg, welcome in. Welcome to the Lord of the Rings stream. And go ahead and give your channel a little bit of a shout out, please.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And no, Phantom Gazer, this is not the Twilight episode.
Not yet.
I am very excited and kind of nervous to be here today, but I always joke and I say I have like 3 huge collections. I love Disney. I love my video games and I love Lord of the Rings. For a long time, it's been a really big part of my life. And I'm really happy to be here with everyone. You guys like Disney. I'm pretty sure everyone here who's here right now subscribed to my channel. So thanks for being here, guys. And thanks, Walt, for having me on. Yeah.
My pleasure. All right, Dan, you're up next, buddy.
Oh, well, yeah, like what Meg said, just thank you so much for allowing me to be on this live stream. I know it's a little bit late for me, but how could I pass such an amazing, amazing topic? So yeah, my name is DizneyDan, DizneyDan, one word, and mainly just talk about Disney and Walt Disney World and being a cast member. And I do my live show every Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Meg as well as Corey Fiasco. And we also have special guests because Walt and Steve have both been on the channels as guests before. So it's really awesome to have you guys on my show. So it's nice to be on your show as well. And yeah, and I'm also a massive movie buff. I love movies, and what better movies than The Lord of the Rings. So thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. No problem at all. And last but certainly not least, Steve, go right ahead, buddy.
Well, first off, Walt, thank you very much. I had the extreme pleasure of being on DizneyDan's Disney Fiasco with Dan and Meg. Was awestruck then. I'm the guy that's doesn't have a whole lot of subscribers yet, but I really enjoy sitting around talking with these guys, supporting the community, all communities really, and just basically trying to get rid of negativity in the world. So whatever we can do to help accomplish that, then that's what we're here for. So.
Well, great. No, thank you, everybody, for sure. And again, what we're going to talk about tonight is all things Lord of the Rings. And for those who haven't seen Lord of the Rings, I think Dan touched on it a little bit earlier off chat before we started. We really feel like you're missing out. These are some great, great movies. And a little bit of history. For those that don't know, and Meg and Dan and Steve, please chime in if I'm wrong on this, but the original movies were The Hobbit, or the original books were The Hobbit, which I think was published in 1937. And The Lord of the Rings came many years later for Tolkien. I think it was 1954 to 1955. He published the last 3, which are The Lord of the Rings. And they have sold millions upon millions of copies of the books. And Peter Jackson took on the unenviable task of trying to turn these complicated, massive books into movies. I think a lot of people weren't sure whether or not he was going to be able to do it. But man, did he do it. They were fantastic. And what's really neat is having this stream in December is wonderful because all 3 of the movies, 2001, 2002, and 2003, came out in December of each year. So I think it's apropos that we're having this in December. Guys, what do you think about that? About the history of the books and things like that before we get into the movies? Meg, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I always think it was interesting that Peter Jackson was able to tackle the Lord of the Rings first. And we all know that The Hobbit is now a series of movies, 3 movies. I think It's wonderful in terms of it's really similar to Star Wars in a sense, where it spans a number of generations. So we have people that maybe grew up reading The Hobbit, like my dad grew up reading The Hobbit. You have people that grew up reading The Lord of the Rings. You have people that grew up watching the movies, and now you have this new generation, because we all know that An Unexpected Journey just came out in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really wonderful that we can do the stream. Well, I mean, it coincidentally worked out that we could do it in December. And I think it's really wonderful that we have a chance to finally sit down and talk about it, because I know all of us really love the series so much. Yeah.
Dan, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I think just for me, how I got into the Lord of the Rings, I actually watched the movies before I even read the book, and I loved the movies so much just out of thinking about what kind of story that Peter Jackson was trying to tell us. When looking at the movie and then reading the book, you realize in the book that there's so much content, there's so much storytelling, so many different character arcs, so many different like things that are happening all over the place. And the way Peter Jackson has directed this movie and produced this movie to look so stunning and to get as much detail as possible in the space of 3 movies. And yes, these movies are very long, but there's no dull moment, I don't think. Every scene is purposefully put into those movies. And that just gets me excited even more, because he does such a great job when the first time I watched it, taking it from the books. So
good points. That's true. Steve, what about you, buddy?
I kind of was like Dan too. I didn't honestly, I don't even know if I even heard of the books, the series, the movies, any of that until November, before the 3rd one came out. So my brother was hounding me that you need to see this movie, you need to see these movies. I'd never seen them, never heard of the stories at all. And then out of the blue one day he put it on, and I saw about 20 minutes of it and decided it wasn't going to be for me. So, and then he kept pushing. So finally we sat down and watched it one night, and obviously I fell in love with the Fellowship of the Ring. So we immediately went on to the Two Towers and we watched that one. And when I finally watched them, the 3rd one was coming out in theaters that weekend. So I watched the first 2 3 times during the first week that I had ever seen them, just so I knew what was going on. I wouldn't miss anything. And then I went back and read the books afterwards, just because I was so fascinated with it. So but that's kind of how I was introduced to it as well. Never even heard of it, and watched the movies first, then the books. So
cool. And that was going to be my first question, and Steve touched on it right away. So Meg, we'll go to you next. What was your first introduction to the Lord of the Rings? When was the first time you were exposed to the Lord of the Rings genre?
So for me, it happened in 2001 when The Fellowship came out. I went and saw the movie, and it really sort of changed my perspective on. I wasn't old enough to read the books. I just wasn't at that level, and I remember I kept asking if I could read the books, and I mean, obviously I did eventually, but similar to Dan and Steve, I saw the movies first, and then that really made me fall in love with it. And then as I got older, I fell in love with it again, because I think we all go through these periods of our lives where we have different interests, but it's for the last, the last almost 10 years, it's been really consistent in my life where I've really loved Lord of the Rings. It's been a huge part of my life.
Cool. And Dan, what about you? What was your first introduction to Lord of the Rings?
For me, it was kind of weird. I remember being in my house and I was talking to my mum, who loved reading the books, and I was just talking to her. I think I was around maybe 14, 15 years old, and she was just telling me all about it. And I kind of was, if I was honest, she was telling me about the story, and I was very, very bored, because I feel like telling a story, especially with the Lord of the Rings, there's so much to it. If they just tell you the story, you're not going to get a lot of information out of it. So I was like, okay, all right, maybe down the line I'll watch it. And then I look in like this cupboard and I see 3 DVDs. One of them is the old DVD extended cut, and then the 2 were the Two Towers and the Return of the King were just its normal cut. So I put in the Two Towers. and I watched The Two Towers, and I absolutely loved it. And then I put in Return of the King, and I just fell in love with Return of the King. So I watched The Two Towers and I watched Return of the King, and then basically I didn't really notice that the extended cut, the DVD case that I had, was the Fellowship of the Ring until like a year later, because it didn't have it on the box or on the side. So I'm like, Mum, can we buy the Fellowship of the Ring? Can we buy Fellowship of the Ring? And I'm like, we've already got it. I'm like, no, we don't. We don't have it. And then I see that the actual green box was actually the Fellowship of the Ring. I didn't realize because it was the extended cut. And I watched the whole of the extended cut of Fellowship of the Ring. And it was kind of like watching 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars and then going back. It's kind of the same thing with Lord of the Rings. Watching Two Towers, Return of the King, and then watching Fellowship. And I loved it. I just absolutely was hooked from then on. And now I watch it 2, 3 times a year, the whole trilogy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before I get to my introduction to Lord of the Rings, in the chat, let me just say hi to a few people that are in here. Juan Rodriguez, AJ from the Kingdom Times is out there. Angela, Pirate Princess Red. Walter Grams is out there. Brian's out there. And thank you to everybody for just dropping in. We definitely appreciate you coming out to join us on this great stream tonight. For me, the Lord of the Rings was something I didn't even know what the Lord of the Rings was for the longest time. And then in 2001, Melissa and I were doing a date night. And we went out to the mall, and it was late. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I'm not tired. Why don't we go to a movie? And we were like, well, there's this movie, The Lord of the Rings. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And we're like, okay, well, we'll go see it anyway. And we went in and saw The Fellowship, and we absolutely fell in love with it. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning when the movie was over. And we just fell in love with that movie. And we were like, at the end of that first movie, we were like, what? It can't end right there. Are you kidding me? And it just was, ever since then, we love the movies. And after that first movie, I read the books, went out, I said, this is what I want for Christmas. And I think the movies came out just before Christmas that year. I said, buy me the books, please. And she did. And I read the books. And ever since then, I love the movies. I think they're fantastic. They are timeless. And I think they connect with everybody in some way. And they're wonderful. My son, in 2001, when the first movie came out, he was born in 96. He was 5, and he loved the movies. And I went and saw Return of the King 5 times in the movie theaters in 3 days. Now we're talking 3-hour movies here, and 5 times in 3 days. So I totally get it. They're such great movies. They really, really are. They really are. But I also wanted to ask you guys, talking about moving from our introduction, let's talk about your characters. Because if there's one thing about the Lord of the Rings, there are tons of characters in the Lord of the Rings. Good guys, bad guys, you name it. There are tons of characters in these movies and in these books, which is one of the great things about the books as well. And for you, for everyone, and we'll go one at a time, and you can give me honorable mentions as well, because I know it's hard to pick just 3. But tell me, who are your top 3 characters in the Lord of the Rings? And it can be books too, because there are characters in the books that are not mentioned in the movies. And so if you have a book character that you'd like to say too, please do. Meg, we'll start with you.
So I actually I picked 4 technically, but I grouped them into 3 different categories. So my number 1 character has to be Samwise Gamgee. He is by far my favorite character. His dedication, loyalty, perseverance, everything to Frodo, to the journey, to making the world a better place is so unbelievable. I admire him so much as a person. I don't think that they would have gotten anywhere without Sam. He makes the movie for me. I find that another character who's on my list and Sam have the most profound speeches in the movies. They really touch my heart, and I think we all connect to certain characters, and Sam is one that I really connect to. But before I have some of his quotes, or some of my favorite scenes are with him, so I'll talk about those later. But my next 2, I grouped them together because they needed to be together, which is Gimli and Legolas. They are the comedic part of this movie. I mean, and Merry and Pippin too, but let's say I find that Gimli and Legolas are the comedy of this movie. Some of my favorite scenes are with them. I'm sure all of us are going to talk about one scene in particular. I think they are the greatest pairing. And to start off with, they're not friends. They're basically enemies. And, in the end, it's like, well, how about we die side by side with a friend? And that makes my heart so warm. And yeah, Brian says they have the best dynamic. I completely agree. Welcome, Caesar. And then the last character I'm going to talk about, I really tried to narrow it down to 3 specific characters, but I had to group Legolas and Gimli together. But my third one has to be Gandalf. Like I said, Sam and Gandalf say some of my favorite quotes in the movies, in the book. He just is so cool. Like, being a wizard, that's awesome. But then to be so profound and have so much insight into the world and into life, and to guide Frodo on this journey of where he has to carry such a burden for all of humanity and all of Middle Earth. And so I seriously could talk all day about these 4 characters and even more. Brian, I think we're all going to talk about that a little bit later, that quote. But if I could pick my top 3, it would be those 4, because I have to put Gimli and Legolas together. They do not get separated. I cannot separate them. So they are a duo. So those are my 3 picks.
Cool. Steve, what about you?
Well, Gandalf is probably my favorite character. It'd be hard to imagine Ian McKellen not playing Gandalf, but actually the first person that was coined to play Gandalf was actually Sean Connery, and who is probably my favorite actor. Unfortunately, he read the script and said he didn't understand it, so he had to pass on the role. But Gandalf has, like Meg said, some of the best lines in the entire movie set of movies, and he is kind of, to me, what holds the glue. He's the wisdom for the group, and he kind of holds everything together. One of my other favorite characters is Legolas, as Meg mentioned as well. They're hard not to like, but just the way Orlando Bloom portrays that character, he's very stoic. Everything is prim and proper, and just the way I don't know. I don't know why I like the bow and arrow aspect of the whole movie, but the way he uses that bow and arrow and the different things he does with Gimli is also really good. And then the last one that wasn't on Meg's list is got to be Gollum. And Gollum is such an important part to this story, and he's a protagonist and an antagonist and going back and forth. And Andy Serkis does an amazing job portraying that character. And I watched a lot of the extras on the DVDs where it shows him putting he had all the little nodes on so that he actually went through the movements that the character then gets portrayed onto screen through the CGI. And just that character and his struggle to get from where he was, and then showing him in the beginning of the Return of the King, which we'll get to later, but showing that story of how he became Gollum is just really, you couldn't have that movie without that. You just couldn't do it. So those would be my 3.
Cool. Dan, what about you, bud?
Well, I have 3 honorable mentions and 3 choices, because for me it was just too difficult. And when it's so difficult, and for me, what I love when I look for characters, it's all about character development and where one character's arc goes one to the other and how they've changed throughout, in this case, 3 movies. So my 3 honorable mentions, my first honorable mention is Gollum. He steals the show. In my opinion, he steals all 3 movies. He has such a massive change halfway through the movie, decides to, he just is so conflicted. And then eventually his darker side takes over. I love that change that he goes throughout the films and the decisions he makes. My second honorable mention is surprisingly Treebeard.
Yeah.
I always found Treebeard very fascinating, because although he has a very minor role, just the way it kind of personifies Middle Earth as a character, like the whole land. Sure. And they do it so well. It takes the whole world that they know of, and they make it a person, a character, and shows the conflict of what's happening and how what they're going to do and how it's going to change. And I really love the fact they created a character that pretty much sums up the land of which they're fighting on. My other honorable mention is Faramir, just because the way he is kind of treated like nobody loves him. His father doesn't love him. He was always second to Boromir, and he had a really rough time in Return of the King. Yeah. Everyone thought he was dead, but when he wasn't, spoiler alert.
Except
but I just love him as a minor character, and really does just show the horrors of war and horrors of family and lineage, you know, for kings and whatnot. But my three choices, the first one had to be Samwise Gamgee. For me, it's not really, for me, Frodo's journey. It's more of Sam's journey. You know, he is literally the guy standing with Frodo every step of the way. And if it wasn't for Sam, Frodo wouldn't have got to Mount Doom. It's just simple as that. He even offered to carry Frodo up the mountain as much as they've been as long as they've been doing so much throughout the story. So Sam for sure. No one said Aragorn, and I love Aragorn. I think he is a fantastic character. He is such a badass. Like, he is a proper, like, he is the ultimate cool dude in this movie. Like, he's got the nice hair. He's got the great sword techniques. He is the actual king of Gondor. He is the guy. But my favorite character out of all films, just because of the performance alone and the way this guy just steals Return of the King for me, is King Theoden. I love King Theoden. And that scene, which I'm going to talk about later, at Minas Tirith, is just, it always makes me like so pumped, so like I just want to ride on those horses with him, and he's just a great character. It's so underrated, and he's just an awesome character. So yeah, those are my six.
Well, everybody, you know, it's funny. Everybody, what's great about these types of streams is the fact that you're going to get different people liking different characters. And it's great because to me, I like all of them. It's so hard to pick just one. I mean, I have one that's my absolute favorite, and everybody knows who that is. But everybody else is like 1A. So it's hard. But for me, my two honorable mentions is, first off, Lord Elrond. I think is a fantastic character. He's more prominent in the books than he is in the movies, although Hugo Weaving does a fantastic Lord Elrond. I love his character. He's the man. I mean, he was there fighting Sauron in the Third Age 2,000 years ago. He was there. He witnessed it. He lived it. He is awesome. I love his character. And I just think he's fantastic. But I think a lot of people... I love Frodo, and he was my other honorable mention. And here's, I think, what gets missed a lot is he doesn't make it without Sam. I agree, but he's the one who ultimately said, I'll take the ring. I'll do it. I'll take on the burden. Nobody else did it. And when they were asked to do it, nobody said yes. He said he would do it. And ultimately, with help, he did it. And to an extent, he kind of, I don't want to give it away. We all know what happened on that ledge. But anyway, I think his whole life was changed. He was never the same after that. And I think he took on the burden, and he got it as far as he could get it. And I think we missed that a lot. I think he's a great character. I really do. So that's my two honorable mentions. But my top three, number three for me is Legolas. Fantastic character. He has the coolest scenes out of everybody in these movies. His scenes are like, that rocks. He is the man. He really is the man. Some of the things going down the steps, on the Oliphant, you name it. He has some, when he jumps on the horse, he has some pretty cool scenes. I love Legolas. I think he is Aragorn's right-hand man. I mean, he is always there for him. He's got his back. And of course, his relationship with Gimli is legendary in the Lord of the Rings books. From where they start to where they literally end up on the boat, leaving together, which you don't see in the movies, but it's in the appendices, which is another whole story. His story is fantastic, Legolas. Number 2 for me is, I agree with you, Dan. I am going to mention him. Aragorn, Strider, whatever you want to call him. He rocks. He is the man. He is awesome. He doesn't want to take on the role of the king. He just wants to be who he is. And he's there with Frodo, and he's like, I can't go with you. He understands that. He understands his weakness. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I just think he's an unbelievable character. He's so strong and yet so humble. I love his character. I think he's fantastic. I'm going to say hi to Joey's Well real fast here. Hi, Joey's Well. Welcome in. But I love Aragorn. I think and Viggo Mortensen. Oh my gosh, he wasn't even the original person who was picked to play the role, and I forgot who it was. But I can't imagine anybody else playing that role. As my dog comes in, come on. And then number 1, of course, it's Gandalf. Whether it's Gandalf the Grey or Gandalf the White, it doesn't matter. Gandalf is such a great character. He is always there for Frodo when he can be. He always has the right thing to say. He's always in the right position. He is willing to sacrifice himself. He's just fantastic. And Ian McKellen in that role, he's fantastic. I want to be Gandalf the Grey. I love Gandalf. He is such a great character. He can fight with the best of them, but he can also, he can, in a time of when, things are really down and out, he can make you feel at ease, like the scene he has with Pippin in Minas Tirith. He's just fantastic. I could talk about him all night long. His character is unbelievable. I love Gandalf the Grey. But that's it. That's my 3 and my 2 honorable mentions. Great picks, everybody. I think these characters, and I want to hear from everybody in the chat. If you have favorite, Stuart Townsend, you're right, Walter Grahams. That's who it was. That's who they originally wanted to play the role of Aragorn. I can't see it. What about you guys?
Yeah,
Russell Crowe was also coined to play that role.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see that.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. I don't know. He maybe, but not Stuart Townsend. They thought he was too young.
I can see him as, Gladiator and Maximus Decimus Meridius, but not as Aragorn. Like you look at him as Gladiator, and you're like, yeah, he's not an Aragorn type for me. Like,
yeah, maybe not. Maybe I don't know, but he's. Yeah, I can't even imagine. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So there you go, folks. That's our top 3 characters. And let's move on to and this is going to be a tough one for everybody. I think everybody's going to have a ton of them. But favorite moments in the films. Talk about your favorite moments in the films. Not the ones that necessarily are emotional, just your favorites. Because we're going to get to the emotional ones in quotes in a little bit. But Meg, ladies first, for you, what are your favorite moments in these films or scenes?
So it was really hard for me to differentiate between the emotional scenes and my favorite scenes because many of my favorite scenes are very emotional. So I won't repeat them, but just know that all of the emotional scenes are some of my favorites. So.
Well, we can do both. We can actually do both right now if everybody wants to. That's fine. If we can link them together because I know they're pretty much the same.
For me, they're very special. My number 1 has to be when Sam and Frodo are in Osgiliath and Frodo's like freaking out because the Witch King is flying around and I'm trying to find a way to express. I have the quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. If I could get any tattoo, it would be a quote from this tattoo. Tattoo of this quote. Oh my God. It just is. Hi from my car. Won't be commenting until I get home, but I'm listening. Oh, Melissa, thanks. But if you don't mind, I'm going to read the quote because then I'll just sort of hit like 3 birds with 1 stone. And if anyone hasn't seen this movie or doesn't know where this is from Two Towers. It's towards the end of the movie. And Frodo says, I can't do this, Sam. And Sam says, I know, it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those are the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something. And Frodo says, "What are we holding on to, Sam?" And Sam says, "That there's some good left in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." And
Yeah, that's a great quote.
that scene, that's some tattoo, Meg. Yeah, so there's like a lot that goes into. No birds were harmed during this live stream. This scene has a huge, like, it just means the world to me. And it's by far my favorite scene. There are so many other scenes that I really love, but this has such a profound impact on my life. And it helps me try and see the world in a different way, because life sucks sometimes. I know that this is like a family-friendly stream, and we are so happy here in Disney, and but sometimes life really sucks. And for me, I have been in points of my life where it feels like that. It feels like this horrible black hole. And how can the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? And we all have those moments in our life. But for me, and everyone's saying that's going to be a big tattoo, the line would be "even darkness must pass," because for me, that's the line that sticks out to me the most. And it's the most profound to me. And I'm trying to cut it short because I have other scenes I want to talk about. And my next, I don't have them in any particular order, but the Osgiliath scene is my favorite. The next one I have down is when Eowyn is fighting the Witch King. I'm going to make it really short. The Witch King goes, like, "Fool, you cannot no man can kill me." And then then Mary hits him in the leg with the sword. He kneels down, and then she takes off her mask and she says, "I am no man." And she stabs him in the face. And that's awesome. Like, girl power. Eowyn is awesome. She's one of my favorite characters. I was going to put her down, but I didn't even think to put honorable mentions. It's like, that's one of my favorite scenes. As a woman, it feels very empowering, especially because the whole movie they spent telling her, "You can't fight, go take care of the kids, go take care of the women, make sure everyone's doing this, you can't go out." And that's what she felt so strongly. And so, like, she knew that she had to fight. She had to fight alongside her family, and she did. And she went out with Mary, and they kicked some butt, and they killed the Witch King. So the next scene that's really important to me, or my favorite one of my favorite moments, is just the introduction to the Shire. The Shire is such a beautiful place. And in the beginning, Concerning Hobbits is one of my favorite songs ever. It's like my relaxing song. I jokingly say that I want to walk down the aisle to that song, but let's be honest, it will probably happen. I just think it's so beautiful. It makes me feel so warm and fuzzy inside. And it just makes me so happy. When I hear the music, I want to cry. For me, it's even more special because I can't remember who was saying, I think it was Brian saying it earlier, like, group trip to New Zealand. For me, I was lucky enough to have gone to New Zealand. I got to see the Shire in real life. And so that brings it even more, it makes it so much more special to me because I've been there and I've walked through some of the, let's all go where hobbits live.
That would be great.
it was so much fun to do that. The next one, I'll leave that one for an emotional scene. Dan said it earlier. Another one is when they're on the front doorstep of Mount Doom, and Frodo is just, he can't take it anymore. And Sam says, "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you." And that scene makes me cry every time. It's so hard. It's so hard not to cry because this is part of the reason why Sam is my favorite character. He would literally do anything. He gives Frodo his last bite of food, his water. He carries Frodo, this huge weight from the ring, up this ginormous volcano, and it's just unbelievable. This next one, I'm sure you guys are all going to talk about. It is in The Return of the King, and it is when Legolas takes down the Oliphant, and it's like the most graceful takedown you would ever see. And it looks like he's doing like dance, like ballerina. It's just so graceful. And then as soon as he like slips off the trunk and he lands as if he's an angel, it's like Gimli says, that still only counts as one. And that's one of my favorite scenes. Another really funny scene that I love between Legolas and Gimli is the drinking scene, where they're like having the drinking game, and and then Gimli ends up getting like really intoxicated. He falls over, and Legolas, who's never had anything to drink before, he goes, I feel this tingling sensation. I think it's affecting me. And I always think that's really funny. And then another scene, I'm going to leave some of the other more emotional scenes to talk about later. But another scene I really, really like is at the end of Two Towers, where they're talking about, do you remember those stories we used to talk about, or when we heard when we were younger? And then Frodo goes, I want to hear about Samwise the Brave. And obviously, like, I love Sam. I think he's the most wonderful character. And this is when Gollum goes all crazy. I mean, he is like the representation of what like either borderline personality disorder is, or any sort of personality disorder, because he goes so far back and forth. But like just hearing like those wonderful stories about what it could be like. Oh, yes, I want to hear that one about Frodo and the Ring. Well, don't forget about Samwise the Brave. And it just, like I said, makes me get those warm, fuzzy feelings. And I've really neglected the chat. I'm sorry. But those are some of my favorite moments. I left some of the emotional ones for later. So thanks.
All right, Dan, you're up next, buddy. Go ahead.
All right. Well, okay. So I'm gonna try and save my emotional ones for a little bit later. I'm just gonna make this really short and sweet because I think the emotional ones I can talk a little bit more about those. Mm-hmm. My favorite scene in the whole of the Lord of the Rings that is not emotional is the March of the Rohirrim, which is in the Return of the King. Mm-hmm. So Minas Tirith is really getting destroyed by the orcs. They are literally have no idea what's going to happen. They're literally on the end of their ropes, and literally Theoden is on his horse, and he's on top of the hill, and he does this incredible speech. Now, for me, he should have easily won Best Supporting Actor for this speech alone because he did such a phenomenal job. Like it is so like heartfelt. The music in that little scene. The Rohan theme just blasting out, and you feel like, right, these guys are here to like kick some butt now, and this is where Gondor is going to help get a little bit of help from Rohan, and just the way he pumps up his whole army and gets them on his side and ready to just march into battle, and he goes down the line and knocks on all the spears, and you see Erwin and Merry just screaming and like charging, and the orcs are terrified. Like the orcs are the first time you see them actually scared because you have hundreds of thousands of soldiers on horseback ready to take them out, and it was such a powerful scene. And like I said, Theoden is one of my favorite characters, and the way he just commanded Rohan and commanded through this whole big massive fight is amazing. I really love this scene so much. I've watched it maybe 7-8 times today already. Just that little scene because it's so good. Another favorite scene of mine is another big battle scene, and that's Helm's Deep. I really enjoy Helm's Deep in the Two Towers because it really shows at one point the darkest time of Middle Earth during this trilogy. It just shows that, right, they've had to escape to Helm's Deep. They're just they don't know what to do. They're backed into a cave. They don't really know where to go, what to do. Gandalf's not there, and Theoden is kind of not thinking straight. He's saying, is this all you got, Saruman? Like, it's not. He just everything's not going to plan. The elves come and they get defeated, and it's literally just Aragon commanding the rest of these soldiers who aren't really soldiers. They're farmers. They're not soldiers. And just the way you just feel them, you feel like we're on a losing battle here. And then, looking on the third day, and the light comes in, and you see Gandalf with the rest of the Rohirrim. Again, similar to reflecting from the Return of the King, you see them coming down the hill. Gandalf leading the charge, shining the light on all the orcs. It just shows that glimmer of hope, and everything just summarizes so well. So those two big scenes, weirdly with the Rohirrim, are just so really great scenes. And my last scene, well, I kind of did a 2-for-1. It all involves the sword of Gondor and the sword that was broken. So when the first half is kind of like the sword being given to Aragon, and like the sword has been mended, and he's kind of like, right, you are now the rightful king. You need to step up and take the sword and really go. You can't be a strider anymore. You are now what you need to be, a king. And then this goes on to my second scene, which is the Ghost King. He says, the only person who can command the army is the rightful king of Gondor. And he's just like, oh, hell with this. And he pulls it out and it blocks the sword. And I'm just like, oh, that is like, yes. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's why Aragon is such a cool character, because he's like, hey, I'm not taking this. I'm pulling out my sword, and you get commanded by me now. So like, I just love how the sword is used to show power. And yeah, I'm just really into the warfare, and really into how these scenes are not just about fighting, but about symbolism and the strength, and also using like the scenes in a way to show like dark times, and the way to get revenge on the orcs and that kind of thing. So those are like my 3 favorite scenes from the movies, and they were just such great scenes, and I just wanted to choose something a little bit different.
Cool. They're great. Great scenes. Absolutely. I agree with all of them. Steve, what about you, bud?
I kind of fell along the same lines as these guys did. The emotional scenes for me were my favorite scenes, and it's also where my favorite quotes came from. So I tried to break it out as best as possible, but I'll start with one of my, maybe my favorite scene outside of the battles themselves. And that is when Gandalf has Pippin climb the tower to light the beacons of Minas Tirith. And that whole scene with the music that goes along, the music was masterfully done without this whole trilogy. The music fit the scenes very well. And when he climbs up there and lights the beacon, and then it starts a chain reaction to call for aid from Rohan. The beacons are lit all the way across. It shows the mountains and shows one lighting on fire. Then it shows the next one all the way back to Rohan. And then Aragorn sitting there, gets up, sees it, runs in, yells, the beacons of Minas Tirith, the beacons are lit. Gondor calls for help. And there's that slight pause where Theoden has to decide what he does. And then after, of course, Aragorn says Gondor calls for aid, Theoden answers, and Rohan will answer. And that whole scene is a really important scene, because without it, if they don't get the backup and the help they need, they don't stand a chance. And the whole trilogy itself is the epitome of good versus evil. It's the ultimate David versus the ultimate Goliath. And you take 9 people who will create the Fellowship, and they have to fight tens of thousands of armies. And then they don't get me wrong, they have the armies of Minas Tirith and the riders of Rohan, and they have their other people too. But it's those 9 people that take on the entirety of evil to get there. So that lighting the beacons of Minas Tirith, though, is probably my favorite scene. Another scene, I'm trying to again distinguish between emotional scenes and regular scenes.
It's hard.
I actually have Theoden's speech that Dan was talking about as an emotional scene for me, but I'll go ahead and talk about it now as well. And that is when he sits there and you hear the horn blow, I start getting tingles down my entire body. It just watching that whole scene where you hear that, and then when he comes into it and he's standing up there, the entire army comes over. Bernard Hill plays Theoden, and it was actually his idea to go through there and smack all the spears with the sword. And when he does that, and he gets towards the end of his speech, and he says, "Spears shall be shaken, shield be splintered, a sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises." Just when he's screaming that, yelling that, and gathering all those people, they're all behind him chanting and yelling, and then they just march down, and you see all the looks on the orcs' faces like they know something bad's coming for them. It's just a really powerful scene, and in one of my favorite. The whole Battle of Minas Tirith is my favorite. I don't know if you can call it a scene, but it's my favorite part of all of the trilogy. So that would probably have to be on there. And then it didn't really mean to me as much when I first started watching Lord of the Rings, but my third one is the very beginning when the trilogy starts. So you get Galadriel starting out with, the world has changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. And she goes on her speech. And then they just explain the story of how things became. Because again, at that point in time, I didn't even watch The Hobbit. I didn't know what The Hobbit was. Didn't know how anything became where it was. But that whole, whatever it is, 2,000 years of history put into 3 or 4 minutes is a really powerful and probably the most important part of the entire trilogy to explain the story of how we got to where we start. So for me, those are probably my 3 important favorite moments.
Fantastic. I agree. And for me, it's funny you said that, Steve, because that was one of the ones for me. It's the prologue. I call it the prologue, the beginning, the explanation of the story in the very beginning there. And one of my favorite quotes, which we'll talk about in a little bit, comes from the prologue. But that's fantastic. I agree. It's an explanation of everything. It really breaks it down for you, the importance of what's about to happen, of what's coming, and it really is fantastic. But for me, the Battle of Helm's Deep is unbelievable. I don't even know how they filmed that scene, but it's fantastic. The Battle of Pelennor Fields, which is at Minas Tirith, that entire battle, the scale of it in the books is even bigger of the amount of people that died. I mean, the bad guys had over 250,000 bad guys there. It's just fantastic. The Battle of the Bridge of Khazad-dûm in the Mines of Moria is another fantastic scene. When he battles the Balrog is fantastic as well. The coronation at the end of the Return of the King. There's the Balrog right there. I think the coronation of Aragorn at the end of the movie of Return of the King is fantastic. The Black Gate, the battle at the Black Gate is an unbelievable scene for me. And then, of course, any scene, like Meg said, it's true. Any scene with the Shire is really great scenes. I think those scenes are fantastic. So lots of scenes in these movies, folks. And for those that haven't seen them, you can definitely, I'm sure everybody will kind of gravitate to certain scenes for sure. Now, I know Dan's got to go soon. So we're going to try to move forward a little bit quicker for him so he can get in some of his other stuff. Dan, I want to touch on the next part. And this is, I think, a big one. And we'll kind of let you finish up, bud. And we're going to let you go first for this one. I know we still have like favorite quotes and scenes, emotional scenes and stuff like that. Where did you want to jump to next? Since you were going to be going soon, I want you to kind of pick next for us, bud.
Well, if I just put emotional scenes and quotes all in one, and then I can wrap that up, I think that'd be quite fun. So when I was thinking emotional scenes was not my favorite scenes because it's 2 completely different things.
Right.
And I literally quote this quote to Meg all the time, and it is my favorite line in all 3 movies. I tear up every single time. And it's at the coronation scene, and everything is depicted very large. Minas Tirith is large. All the humans are large. And when Aragorn goes up to the 4 hobbits and says, "My friends," I'm tearing up right now, "you bow to no one," and everyone bows down to them. Just that whole gesture just makes me honestly lose it. I lose it, because it is just so meaningful, right? You have this incredible, massive journey, and they're focusing on tiny hobbits. Just the scale of everything being put onto these 4 hobbits just blows my mind. And the way they directed this tiny little scene gets me every single time, because it is so heartwarming. It gives Merry and Pippin something they deserve. It gives Sam and that close-up of Frodo knowing that he's gone through everything. And just the way Aragorn just comes across to them is amazing. It really is just a phenomenal scene, and gets me every single time, because it is by far is probably my favorite scene of the entire movie. Similarly, a scene that came a couple of maybe 20 minutes beforehand was the final battle, which is at the Black Gate, and it's Aragorn's speech, and it's the Men of the West scene. And he says to all the Gondor men that are left, all the Rohirrim men that are left, and all of his friends, and he talks about, and he literally says, "For Frodo," and he turns around, and you just see him charging at the orcs, and you're like, this is what it's all about. You got this small group of people, small group of men and women and wizards going up against hundreds of thousands of orcs, all for this one tiny hobbit. And you just see Aragorn run into the army, and you're like, this guy is the guy. Like, he is the guy of the movie. Like, he's the ultimate big man. So again, similarly, Aragorn just again bringing those amazing short one-line speeches. One other really emotional scene is Pippin singing to Denethor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how Faramir is charging into battle, knowing that he's severely outnumbered. And just the way Pippin sings, and the way, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm talking about food, but not in the nicest of ways. How Denethor just eats all this food quite ferociously, and it kind of personifies what's going to happen. Like how he eats the tomato and how it bursts into like what looks like blood. And it just the way they've directed this, Peter Jackson just did a phenomenal job with this tiny scene. And that's why I love Faramir so much, because he is really unappreciated and Denethor doesn't really care about him. And yeah, that's a really, really touching moment. Going on to my favorite quotes, still only counts as one, has to be there. It just the way this scene just comes about is amazing. And similarly, another great quote from Gimli says, it's in the Two Towers. He goes, "Certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for?" Like, he just has those great one-liners. He brings that sense of comedy to the movie that makes you think like, right, it's not all doom and gloom. You know, there is some sort of comedic effect. And these two guys, Legolas and Gimli, just go backwards and forwards, bringing that sense of comedy to this quite dark and serious trilogy. So yeah, that's what I had. And just to summarize, Lord of the Rings, you know, I don't care if people have never seen it, because they're missing out on something big. And as a fan of movies, this is probably one of two trilogies that I think are the best trilogies of all time. There's not a bad movie in this trilogy, and it just is a wonderful story, wonderful storytelling, brilliant directing, amazing music. Like, if you guys haven't watched Lord of the Rings, I'm assuming everybody in the chat has watched Lord of the Rings. Please, please, please go check it out, because it will get you so happy by the end, despite all the dark times. And yeah, Walt, thank you so much for letting me come on the stream. I know I got to head off a little bit early. It's still it's coming up to 1 a.m. in the morning here, but I just want to say thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Dan, our pleasure. No, thank you, bud. And that's why I wanted you to go. We definitely appreciated having you. Please plug your channel before you head out. For those who may be watching on the replay or who are new to the channel, please go ahead and plug your channel real fast before you head out.
So yeah, my name is DizneyDan. I'm predominantly a Disney YouTuber, former cast member, and I do a Disney live show with Meg and some special guests as well, every Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, called Disney Fiasco. So if you love your Disney, please come and check out check out my channel. I'm also started to do a few more movie stuff. Going to do an updated Blu-ray collection that I do every year. So 2019 edition will be coming out soon. And also, if you love food, I mean, just come talk to me about food, especially Disney food, because that's what it's all about. It's a great thing you do in between rides. So yeah, it's all about Disney. So please come and check out my channel, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram on the same name. Please make sure that it's DizneyDan, not all in one word, because there's another DizneyDan who's got a couple more subscribers than me, but he's him. You want to come to my channel. So yeah, thank you, Walt, so much, and it's been a blast.
Thanks, bud. I appreciate it. We're going to do this again for sure.
Absolutely.
Definitely be one of the first ones we asked to come on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys.
All
and
right,
I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
See you soon.
See you.
Bye. All right, Meg. So we're going to go to you next, and we're going to do the emotion. Let's go to the emotional scenes, Steve and Meg. We're going to do those next because they are important, and I think you'll agree. The emotional scenes are the ones that are probably the really important scenes as well in these movies. Would you agree?
Yes, for sure. 100%.
All right, Meg, go ahead. What are your emotional scenes for you? What are the ones that really, put that lump in your throat?
Well, like I said, my favorite scene out of the whole trilogy is the Osgiliath scene, but that is so emotional for me. Dan mentioned a couple of my other ones. So at Aragon's coronation, where they say, "My friends, you bow to no one," that scene gets me every time. Even when Dan was saying it, I was starting to tear up just a little bit. I also had on my list that end battle where they all go for Frodo, and then when they realize that the ring has been destroyed, but then it erupts and their faces, oh my gosh, it breaks my heart. Another one that it really has to go with the quote, which I have. It's Gandalf and Pippin. They're in Minas Tirith, and Pippin says, "I didn't think it would end this way." And Gandalf says, "End? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back, and it all turns to silver glass, and then you see it." Pippin says, "What?" Gandalf, "See what?" Gandalf says, "White shores, and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise." And Pippin says, "Well, that isn't so bad." And Gandalf says, No, it isn't." And that part always gets me too. And I think I'm like very hesitant to talk about it because it's like very important to me. But the reason that like I love Lord of the Rings so much is that like one of my family members passed away, and it was a very special series to both of us. And The Fellowship was always our favorite. And the last thing I ever got to do with him was watch The Fellowship of the Ring. And Steve, I know you're always saying Return of the King is the best. And like, I completely agree. It's an awesome movie, but for like that reason, like I have that memory and that's my favorite. And so relating so much grief and death and loss to this movie and to my own life, it's so profound.
Sure.
And it just is very emotional for me. Another one is when Frodo and Sam they've defeated Sauron, they've destroyed the ring, and they're here, and like they don't know if they're going to make it home, and they just say, I'm so happy to be here with you here at the end of all things. And I mean, if that doesn't get you, then I don't know what does. It gets me every time. Frodo and Sam are probably my favorite friendship because of Sam's loyalty and the fact that they made it and they saved everyone and their hard work, and just it's the end. I mean, and they're together. They started together. They went through the whole thing together. Except, okay, this is why I don't like Frodo, because he's literally like Sam, go home. He says that, and it bothers me.
Yeah, but I don't remember him saying that actually in the books. I think that was creative done by Peter Jackson, because I don't remember him ever sending Sam away in the books. I don't think that happened in the books. I think that was creative indifference, or whatever you call that Peter Jackson did. Because in the books, and I don't mean to interrupt, Meg, in the books where they got separated was in the in Shelob's lair, which I'm surprised none of us have talked about. But they got separated in Shelob's lair, and that's where they got separated. But I don't remember him ever saying that in the book. But I could be wrong. I mean, I don't remember. It's been a while since I read. But I'm not sure. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, I didn't like that scene either.
I know, it's like, go home. Anyway, my final, like, it's not necessarily an emotional scene where I just feel like I want to cry, but it really does make me reflect on my own life, and it really puts things into perspective. And of course, it's with Gandalf, like, who else? And Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. And Gandalf says, so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to us. And it just, that also gets me, because it really is like, right now we're all hanging out. We're having like a nice time. We're talking about things that we like and Lord of the Rings, and we talk about Disney. And for me, like, bad things happen, bad things happen to everyone, but I try and put it into a perspective that no matter what happens, I only have so much time on Earth, and I have to try and live the way that I want to live, and I want to do it for me. And so, not that it's a quote that makes me cry or it makes me upset. It's just something that always tends to put things in perspective for me. And then to be able to, I think a lot of these quotes have us reflect on our own lives, which is why I think Lord of the Rings is just the greatest. And Tolkien was just an amazing writer, and so many, I'm surprised actually, I don't know, who knows if we're going to say it's like, there's so many overused quotes that people don't even know it's from the book, like all that glitters is not gold or whatever, and people don't know that that's from Lord of the Rings. Like, it's crazy. But I talked about Osgiliath. Dan took a couple of my emotional scenes. It just, so much of the movie is very emotional to me, and it's hard to pick certain moments, but those are definitely some of my top ones.
Those are great moments. I agree. They're all very, very emotional. Steve, what about you, bud? What about for you?
Well, like Meg, I relate. Everybody to some extent could relate Lord of the Rings to real life. You don't necessarily have wizards and hobbits and everything else, but we do have different races of people, different cultures of people, and there's always a struggle for things that are in the movie. Your greed, power, things like that. And this whole story can relate to some people in different ways. And that's one of the things that makes Lord of the Rings really, really special to me. And everything that was on Meg's list and everything that was on Dan's list is also on my list so far.
Of course.
But I do want to touch on a couple more of them. I do want to touch also going back to Billy Boyd, Pippin singing with Denethor. The way, like you said, when he eats the tomato, or when I think it was Dan that said it, when he eats the tomato and the tomato juice drips down his chin as the whole scene happens. Faramir is so desperate for his father's love, and so desperate just to gain his approval, which happens to a lot of people in life, that he is willing to ride to his death, certain death, knowing it's going to be to please his father, who may or may not be pleased anyways. And he even said, his quote is, should I return, think better of me, father. And of course, then his father another villain, which says that will depend on the manner in which you return. And that whole scene, the music again going through it, where he rides out, he leads his group of men. The townspeople are throwing the flowers on the walk. He charges in with zero chance of winning that battle and taking Osgiliath back. But he drives in, then they all get pummeled, and that the whole thing with the singing and everything is one of the most emotional. It's probably the most emotional scene for me in the whole trilogy. Just the way it was done, the aesthetics of it, the music, everything was just done perfectly. And it's one of the few, I believe it's one of the few sung music that has actual singing to it throughout the whole movie as well.
True.
And it was just really well done. Another one of the emotional scenes that I think has a lot of weight, and I was actually surprised Meg didn't say this, is the scene where they're in the mines of Moria and Gandalf comes to what we believe is his demise. When he's fighting, he slams his staff down on the bridge, and there it is right there. And he slams his staff down and says, "You shall not pass." The power that he emotes in it, and the manner in which he portrays that is phenomenal. And then when it falls and you think he's better, then all of a sudden you see the fire whip come up and grab him. And if I'm spoiling it, sorry, it's been 12 years ago or 15 years ago. So the whip comes up and grabs him. He's hanging off the end, stares Frodo and the others in the eye and says, "Run, you fools." And then he falls to his demise, what we believe is his demise. That was just a really emotional and powerful thing too. And I couldn't have imagined trying to watch these movies and then have to wait a year to come out and watch the next one. I mean, I was fortunate that I wasn't introduced to them until the third one came out. But so those are definitely some of my favorites. Let's see what I got. I got 4 pages of notes here. I'm trying to find ones that were not already said. But and the other one was at the beginning of the Return of the Kings. I'm sorry, the third movie where they tell the story of Smeagol.
Yeah.
And because they kind of take Gollum, who is this creature, and they kind of humanize him or hobbitize him or whatever you want to call it. They kind of humanize him and put him into he's a person now.
Yeah.
And it shows the kind of things, again, like I was saying in the beginning, what we all struggle with are their temptations and greed and power and things like that are all present. And it's how we handle them. He obviously did not handle it well. Basically murdering his friend over a piece of gold that he wound up calling as precious. So that whole story of how they, coming right out of the gate in the third movie, showing that was an incredible story to put him into perspective for me.
That's fantastic. They're all very emotional scenes. And it's funny, but I actually had some different emotional scenes for me over time that I thought were hard for me to take. As funny as it may sound, Boromir's death was hard for me. That was an emotional scene. I think he is a what I like to call a tragic hero. He was very weak when it came to the ring, but I think he redeemed himself in the end. He was there for his friends, and he was the only one of the Fellowship to really die. He was the only one that didn't make it to the end. He wasn't there for the celebration, and that was sad when he died in the end there. And so for me, that was really an emotional scene. Obviously, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, when Gandalf falls, is extremely emotional for me. When you hear Frodo scream, and then Boromir calls to Aragorn to run and get out, and then that scene at the end when they come outside and he's telling everybody to get up, we got to keep moving, and he calls to Frodo, and Frodo turns around and you see the tear coming down his face. That's a hard scene for me, And then the other one for me, obviously, you bow to no one. That's a great emotional scene. But the hardest scene for me, and this is one that nobody ever talks about, and I don't know if it's because it's missed, but it's so important to me, is the scene after the great battle of the Black Gate. When Frodo wakes up, the first person he sees is Gandalf. And that's such an emotional scene for me. I cry every time I see that scene. You got to remember, he never knew Gandalf was still alive. The last time he saw him, he fell to his death. And then when he wakes up, that's the first person he sees. And that's such an important scene to me. And the music they're playing as they do that, and you see Gandalf getting ready to cry, and then everybody else comes in after that and sees him. It's such an emotional scene for me. And it's my favorite. it's my favorite scene. And I think it's one that everybody forgets. And I remember when I told my son that, I was like, this is the first time he's seeing him since he fell. He didn't know he was ever alive still. So those are my emotional scenes. And I think all of them are so emotional. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, for sure. And I almost put that scene, Walt, because I have such a love for Frodo and Sam together as a pairing. So when, like, I know it's important when he sees Gandalf for the first time, when he sees Merry, Pippin, Legolas, Gimli, but the last person to walk in is Sam, and
right.
Boy, does that tug at my heartstrings.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, well, I think he saw his two most important people first and last. And I think they did that right. He saw Gandalf first, and he saw Sam last. And I think those are the two most important people in his life, even more than Bilbo, because, well, at least for these movies they are. Bilbo is very important to him, and he's a whole nother character that we could talk about that's very important. I mean, he's the only one that I think, if I can remember, willingly gave up the ring. It was hard, but he gave it up. But that's a whole nother story. So now I want to ask you guys, I want to go into quotes, because there's so many quotes in these movies. And I know we touched on some of them. And Steve, we're going to start with you. What are some of your favorite quotes that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
Well, you could quote the entire trilogy, and it would be worthy of being on here. I could literally sit here with you guys for hours, and we talk about the first scene, the second scene, the third scene. But one of my favorite quotes is when Gandalf is talking to Frodo, or I think it's Gandalf talking to Frodo, and he says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo. Going out your door, you step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." And I just think that's a important quote that you can relate to in real life, because if you don't take chances and you don't adventure out, as Meg said, you need to make the most of the life that you're given. I mean, it is inevitable that one day it will come to an end, and if you don't live your life and take advantage of the time that you have and be adventurous and do those things to make your life a happy one, then it's a lost opportunity, in my opinion. So that is one of my favorite quotes, just because I think it relates so well to just real life. One of my favorite, it's not an inspiring quote by any means, but I think it portrays how deeply Gollum is conflicted with himself. And, he's got the split personalities and the way they talk back and forth. Just the way he says it and what he says, it's real simply just says, we wants it, we needs it, must have the precious. That ring is everything to him. And it epitomizes his inner struggle for greed and power. And I don't even know if it's necessarily power for him. It's just, it's shiny. He wants it. It's his precious, and it consumes him. It ultimately consumes him in the end. And I just think that one's another one. And then one of the other ones that I've got probably 40 written down here, but one of the other ones that I have written down here too is when Gandalf says at the end of the Two Towers, I believe it is, he just simply says, "The battle for Helm's Deep is over. The battle for Middle Earth is about to begin."
Yep.
And that just, even in the movies, I love how they filmed all three of them together. And then they built in Helm's Deep. As soon as they were done filming Helm's Deep, they tore it down and built Minas Tirith in its place. And just creating that small world and then making it even bigger, you knew a bigger battle was coming. You went from a small battle of a place to a battle for the world, and that quote just puts it all in perspective that something big is about to happen. And so I'll stick with those three for now.
Meg, what about you? What are some of your favorite quotes?
So I read some of mine already. Another one that's really awesome to me is Boromir when they're in Rivendell, and it says, one does not simply walk into Mordor.
That's true.
Like, it's become a meme now. It's so funny. It's like, it's not that easy just to destroy this stupid ring. It's like something so small. Like, one does not simply walk into Mordor. And I always find that to be really funny, even though it is very like it's a serious moment. But I remember I was telling Steve one time that I really love playing the Lego games, the video games. And so
fantastic.
I was playing Lego Lord of the Rings, and one of my achievements on Xbox was one does not simply, and then the achievement was to walk into Mordor.
Yep, it's true. Funny.
Another scene that I really like, and I mentioned it earlier, but I feel like I have to say it again, is when Éowyn, the Witch King, says, "Fool, no man can kill me," and she says, "I am no man," and that's like one of my favorite parts. Another quote that I really like, "The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places." And then they keep going, and it's like, I feel like a lot of the story is like we're choosing to see the light in things, and that's what stands out most to me. But I already read like my really long quote, so I'll toss it back over to you, Walt, because similar to Steve, I feel like we could just talk about this for more, like several more hours, and we're already an hour and 17 minutes into this stream.
No problem at all. Those are all great quotes. I'm going to go over a few that I think are important quotes that I thought were big parts of the movies and big scenes. One of them is when Sam says, you know, Gandalf told him, "Don't you lose him, Samwise Gamgee. I don't mean to." That's such an important quote, and it really is. And of course, the one in the beginning of the prologue is, and you know, well, Galadriel says it when they're in Lothlorien. She goes, "Even the smallest person can change the course of the future," and it's true. And of course, you bow to no one. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And of course, in the prologue, one of my favorite quotes is "The time will come when hobbits will shape the fortunes of all." It's such an, and it's so true. It just tells you, and all these big battles with all these giant warriors and great fighters and bad guys and orcs, it all comes down to two little hobbits that have to save the day. And it's what makes the story so great. But a couple others real fast is when Gandalf says to Faramir, "Your father loves you, and he'll remember it before the end." And when he says to Frodo, "Bilbo was meant to find the ring, which in your case, you were also meant to have it," and that's an encouraging thought. It's true, it really is. And then one of Boromir's favorite lines, I think he has, and you guys can say this, is when he's holding the ring when they're up on the mountain, and he goes, "It's such a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing."
Yep.
And it's true. It's such a, and you can tell the ring's taken him over. And then one of my favorite lines from the book, and it's in the extended edition, and a lot of folks forget about this, is when they're leaving Lothlorien and they're in the boats, and of course Galadriel gives everybody something. Yeah. And they asked Gimli what he wanted, and he goes, "I asked for a locket of hair, and she gave me 3. And that's, I mean, I don't know if you remember that. That's prominent in the books, and it's so important because there was someone else who had asked her for lockets of hair, and she wouldn't give it to him. And he asked for just 1, and she gave him 3. It's an important scene because it just goes to show you with the friction that elves and dwarves have, that you can come together for a common goal and put your differences aside for the betterment of the world. And then the last one for me is the eagles are coming from the scene at the Black Gate. It's so important to realize how important the eagles coming is because it shows that everybody is affected by Sauron losing. He has to lose because if he wins, even the eagles are going to be affected, and they know it, and that's why they're there to help. So That's all. I mean, those are the ones for me. I know that's a lot more. And you guys, if you have more quotes, please tell us what those are, because there's so many great ones.
Well, I actually do have two more that I had written down that I thought were important. One of them is when, during Aragorn's whole speech, that he was talking and he says, "A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship, but today is not that day."
That's great.
That was a really powerful one. And then, along with all the darkness in the movies and in the trilogy, and all the wrong that goes into the world, there's a moment in time when Arwen, who is immortal and can sail to the undying lands, she chooses a death over eternity because of her love for Aragorn. And adding and I can't believe I'm actually the one saying this, but adding the power of love to this kind of story just made it even better. And I think her quote is, "I'd rather share one lifetime with you than face all the ages of this world alone."
Oh my God.
That's great.
And he says that to me all the time. And it's yeah.
It might be there's a lot of powerful things, but if you can relate anything to real world and the emotion of love, and that one quote applies to everything, where she gives up a lifetime of just for eternity to be mortal. She chooses a mortal life to be with the one that she loves, so that she would rather face one mortal life with him than to live a lifetime alone. So
I agree. And let me just say this. In the Lord of the Rings books and in the movies, there are really only 3 female characters. You have Arwen, Éowyn, and Galadriel, who are prominent. But all 3 of them are such important characters to the entire story. You don't have a lot of them, but their impact on the entire books and trilogy movies are immeasurable. I can't even imagine Aragorn without Arwen, and the scenes they have together are fantastic. Éowyn is such a great character. She's, like you said, she's fighting in the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and it's fantastic. And Galadriel is, Cate Blanchett's fantastic as Galadriel. I mean, I just love her character. She's one of my favorites as well. I love her character. She does great. And she has one of the favorite lines too, when she gives him the light, Frodo, the little light, the light of Elendil, I think it's called, or something like that. And she goes, "It's a light for you for when all other lights go out." And great characters. All right. Well, before we finish up, the last thing I want to talk about with you guys is, in your opinion, for you, what makes the Lord of the Rings so special? What is it that is the connection for you? What is it that makes it so special, timeless, and something that resonates for you? Meg, we'll start with you.
So I sort of already touched upon this, but just it's a very emotional connection to me for me to the movies. My brother passed away several years ago, unexpectedly, and the night before he passed away, we were watching The Fellowship of the Ring, and it just means the world to me that I have that memory. And it was always something. I'm also going to be really honest. I got my wisdom teeth taken out when I was 17, and I was on laughing gas, or I was on some sedative. And I came home and all I wanted to do was watch Lord of the Rings. He came and watched it with me, but I was crying, laughing, because I just was so out of it. It was one of those videos on YouTube of people videoing their family after they got their wisdom teeth taken out.
Right.
But I was going in and out of whatever. It was a pretty funny experience, but just to have that memory of him within the movie, and like I said, The Fellowship was our movie, and the fact that Lord of the Rings and milkshakes, the fact that there are such strong themes of perseverance and light versus dark, and letting light win, because I have been in such dark places in my life, to have that as a symbol especially for Frodo, who carries such a burden. And I mean, I almost view Frodo, you guys could totally disagree with me, but almost as the way that Jesus suffered for our sins and suffered for us. And Frodo carried that burden just like Jesus carried that burden. And
I can understand the correlation. Sure.
I don't want to like bring it there, but I also see that, and it makes me feel very connected to the characters and to my brother. And I love Sam and Frodo's friendship. I love everything about all the characters except Denethor because he's rude. And but it will always have a really special part in my life, and it will always have a place in my heart. It just is always so important. That's why I love it so much. I was really nervous about this because I knew we were going to be talking about more emotional things. So I'm like proud of myself that I
think you did great.
And I am just very happy that I'm here with you guys. So
yeah, we're very happy you're here too, Meg, for sure.
Thanks.
Steve, what about you, buddy?
Well, first off, Meg, I know that can't be easy. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Please, thank you.
I knew there was a reason for your connection. You've never shared that with us before, with me anyways, before. And that is extremely a powerful message, and I can understand why that would stick with you for the rest of your life. And with that, and I'm glad you opened the door, because this really is a story of biblical proportions. I mean, you can spin it any way you want it, but it is good versus evil, light versus dark. And yes, ultimately light does win, but it's not without sacrifice. And it is again, I didn't read the books first. Peter Jackson did an amazing job. The scenery, the music, everything, it was designed for me to make me feel something. And if you cannot relate to the story in some way, then you're probably not going to enjoy these movies as much as we do. But just being able to sit around, having the freedoms that we have to be able to talk about the movie like this in this platform with friends that I actually truly consider friends is one of the best things that could possibly happen for me. And there are so many moments that, and you have to go out on a limb sometimes to get there, but there are so many moments in these movies that we can relate to real life. I cannot think of another set of movies that you can completely relate to in everyday life. If you can twist the quotes and the battles, and it's all a struggle of life is what it is. And the whole thing brings us down to, whether you could be a struggle with greed, or you could be a struggle in a war. We have wars today, unfortunately. It could be a struggle with a lot of different things. Being able to tie that all together and relate it to your life and be able to feel something when you watch these movies, it's just brilliantly, masterfully done. And in my opinion, there's not another set of movies or single movie that even comes close to doing that outside of Lord of the Rings. So that's why it's extremely special to me.
That's great, Steve. I agree 100%. The emotional side of it is what makes it so important. I think for me, what makes it so special is I always call myself, and Melissa says this too, and my friends say, I call myself a movie prude. There's some, it takes a lot to impress me with a movie. And by far, Lord of the Rings did that. And what's important to me is story, which the movies and the books are, the story is incredible. And character development has to be important. And they develop these characters incredibly throughout all the movies. You have a connection to these characters. You love these characters. You don't want to see anything happen to them. And you're elated when good things happen to them. And the music in these movies resonates for me. If someone were to play Lord of the Rings music, it's from Lord of the Rings the minute you hear it. It's like that. I used to have it as my ringtone on my phone. And other people, I could play it and they wouldn't know what it was. And I could say, that's Lord of the Rings. That's from, Concerning Hobbits, or that's the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, or I could tell you when the scene was when they played the music. So, but you're right. It resonates throughout because there's an emotional factor. I always, for me, and it's going to sound really corny, and Melissa probably doesn't even know this, is when I see Frodo and Sam, I see my two boys.
Oh,
That's what I see. That's my two sons together. And it always makes emotional for me, like it's doing right now. So I'm going to stop talking about it before I break down. But that's who I see. I always see them. And that's one of the scenes, I got to say this real fast. When Frodo's hanging off the edge and Sam says, "Don't you let go." And he says, "Please don't let go." It's true. It's like, don't let go, dude. You can't die. It's such a hard scene. But it does resonate for me. And these movies are fantastic. And Steve, you hit it right on the head. There is no better trilogy, period. I love Star Wars. It's not better. I love Marvel. It's not better. I love Harry Potter. It's not better. These movies are unbelievably well done, well written, well acted. CGI is fantastic. The motion capture they did with Schmeagol is unbelievable. They're wonderful. They really are. But any final comments before we go? I know we're running way over, but I knew we were going to kind of do a mega stream tonight. I knew we were going to go over an hour, but I don't want to hold everybody for too long. Meg, any final thoughts?
Juan just said, I totally forgot about this quote. First of all, I would like to just say, has anyone noticed that throughout the chat of the entire stream, I've been like putting in little hints to quotes of the movie? But Juan just said, "A wizard is never late." And then he says, "Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to." And that's also one of my favorite lines. I can't believe I forgot it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Oh, and I got to say one other thing too. I always forget this. And Mason, my son, was in there earlier, and he mentioned the scene at the Grey Havens. It's such an emotional scene. That end scene, and he makes a good point, is the last time you see Frodo, you see him smile. And it's almost like he's Frodo again. Because the first time you ever see Frodo, when he stands up from reading that book, what is he doing? He's smiling. And that's the last thing you see him do. And I forgot about that too. I'm sorry. Steve, any last thoughts, buddy?
No, there is one more quote that I thought of too, and it's not as emotional, but it does again apply to real life. And it's where Bilbo says, "I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve."
Yeah.
There's a little bit of goodness and bad in there. So, and it just, you can take it however you want to take it, but it's a great quote. But no,
it is.
Walt, I could not be happier that you guys invited me to spend time with you guys, my friends, Meg and Dan as well. Again, this is a powerful trilogy. It means a lot to all of us, and I'm glad that we have the ability to sit and talk about this and spend time to just to discuss our feelings and our emotions with people. So again, I am extremely grateful that you guys invited me. Thank you very much. And thank you to all you in the chat as well for being here with us throughout this and just listening to us talk the whole time. So
I would like to hop on that train just to say thank you, Walt, for hosting us. Thank you, Steve, for being here. Thanks, Dan, for being here. Thank you for inviting me. I don't have many people in my life that allow me to talk about Lord of the Rings for this long because, first of all, my mom has never seen all the movies because she doesn't understand it. She doesn't like science fiction or anything. Welcome, Nathan. And my dad loves Lord of the Rings too, but not to the extent that I love it. So my brother said he can no longer watch Lord of the Rings because we have seen it too many times. And so you guys are letting me, like I said, pursue one of my other loves. I love Disney, which is primarily what my channel is about. But I also feel confident now that I can explore some other things that I really like too, like my video games or Lord of the Rings collection. And then I just wanted to quickly show some of my Funko Pops.
Yes, please.
I just have a few. And so we have a Chaser Frodo there. He's like, "What? I got stabbed with a Morgul blade. What?" And then we have a Ring Wraith there, or the Nazgul. The Ring Wraith is here. Look at him. He glows in the dark. And then I showed you guys the Balrog a couple times. But I have a big Funko Pop collection, and I'm getting some of the other Lord of the Rings ones. My like bigger part of my collection is The Hobbit, but I didn't think that was appropriate because this is Lord of the Rings and not The Hobbit. So maybe next time we do The Hobbit.
That's a good idea.
I'm just saying. But thank you so much, Walt. Again, thank you, Steve. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everyone in the chat.
Meg, plug your channel real fast, please.
Oh, I am Megan from Mickey's Magic, and I never ever know what to say. I have a giveaway going on right now if you guys want to join. Tomorrow, I'm going to be going live from the Mickey Mouse exhibit. If you guys would like to join, that's going to be around 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you guys like Disney or anything Disney related, or I guess Lord of the Rings, consider subscribing to my channel. If you're here in the chat or watching the replay, thanks so much, Walt, again, for having me on here. I was like really nervous, but I was also very excited too. But thanks, guys, for everyone in the chat. Thanks, Walt. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everyone.
Sure. Steve, go ahead, buddy.
No, again, just, thank you so much, Walt. This has been an absolute pleasure. I could do this every night of my life and be happy. I really could. But no, and to everyone in the chat, thank you so much. Continue to support each other. That's how we're all growing. We're all getting started. I'd rather have 10 subscribers that are true friends like you guys than to have 100,000 subscribers. Like Meg said, there's nobody around me that loves Disney, that loves Lord of the Rings, that loves the things I love as much as as you guys do. So we come here to find those kind of people. We don't need negativity in our lives. There's enough of that every day as we go along. Continue to promote everybody, continue to live a positive life, and live the life that you are given. It's the only one you're going to get. So be happy and make the most of it. So thank you, Walt. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Dan.
Sure. Did you want to plug your channel at all, Steve?
Yeah, it's just Stevesworld. We, again, we just have a good time. It's technically listed. The tagline is all things fun, but we open up toys, Disney. I'm really starting to enjoy these streams more than anything. Just sitting around talking with friends. So, but no, we do some things, and I challenge everybody to try to do Vlogmas. If you're a creator, a content creator, try to do Vlogmas. It's not easy. Meg is doing it as well. So it will consume you, but you will get out of this what you put into it. So if you want a lot out of it, if you want to make new friends, if you want to do things with your channel to promote things, then you need to put in the work and the support for other people to get back what you want. So again, thanks guys. I appreciate it.
My
pleasure. Put Steve's channel in the chat. So if anyone's interested, go subscribe to him.
Yes, please. And folks, everybody that's out there in the chat, thank you for joining us tonight. We really did have a great time with this. I know it's our love of Lord of the Rings. And, for those that hopefully love it as well, we're really glad you were here. And if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, maybe this will sway you to become someone who maybe watches the movies now. So we really appreciate everybody coming out in the stream. If you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay as well. On your way out, folks, if you haven't hit that like button, please do so. It definitely helps the stream. And subscribe to Mickey's Magic, Stevesworld, of course, DizneyDan, who was in here earlier. They're great channels. They all do wonderful, wonderful stuff. And if you have time, if you could subscribe to Mouse Talk as well, we would appreciate it. But we had a great time tonight. There's nothing warms my heart more than be able to talk about something I love with friends. And you're all my friends. In the chat, Megan, Steve, Dan, it means a lot to both Melissa and I that you guys support us and come out here and do this, because there's a lot of negativity in the world, and it's great that we can have positive, fun time. So we love you guys. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And like I always like to say, please take care of yourselves and each other. And we'll talk to you all soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.